One of the biggest issues for young voters is housing affordability. And when you look at over the past couple of years, it has been a problem that has just continued to grow more and more and more. From interest rates that have more than doubled from 2020, we were looking at rates around 3%. Now we are sitting back again at around mid sixes. And when young buyers are looking at this right now, it's pretty shocking. And we're asking ourselves, well, is there ever a crash that's going to be coming? What do I do? Should I just wait and see what happens? I've been paying attention, tapping into some of the news lately, and seeing what these candidates actually have planned for the housing affordability problem, and breaking it down and saying, okay, is this one possible? Have these things been done before? So I wanted to get into that today with you guys. So let's dive into it. And we'll be back in 3, 2, 1. We gone. Welcome back, family, to another episode of the First Sip Podcast. I'm your host, Dekimbe Smith. Today we are sipping on some good old ginger tea, and I wanted to talk to you guys about what's going on with this upcoming election and the promises for the housing market. Now, of course, once again, I'm a real estate agent, so I'm definitely tapping in and paying attention to what do these candidates have planned for housing, right? And when we really look at it, there's some differences and there's some similarities from both of their proposals. Starting off with Vice President Harris's plans. Now, she's proposing to offer a $25,000 down payment assistance for first-time buyers. Now, at first glance, this is something that looks great. All right, I know I saw this. I was like, wow, that can definitely help out a lot of people, because I do not know people who just have an extra $25,000 laying around, especially when it comes to buying your first home. Once again, it sounds great. It will definitely help affordability. But on the backside of it, you start asking yourself, will this also drive up home prices? Because if home sellers out there know that, okay, well, people are getting extra money, they're going to be able to come to the table with more cash in hand, you would think, right? So that's the concern here with this. If you give people more money towards a down payment assistance, is this then going to lead to home sellers just pushing up the prices and bringing us back to the same position that we're in right now of just unaffordable homes, people needing even more money to be able to close a deal, and just once again making it unaffordable for people who are just trying to get into the market. Now, we have seen this before back in 2009 when we were going through the Great Recession. Obama had signed off on a proposal to give home buyers about $8,000 in a tax credit if they bought a house between a certain period of time. And I believe it was between 2008 to 2010. And with that, it definitely helped out a lot of people. They said it brought around 2.5 million extra buyers to the market. But on the backside of it, there were some negative consequences as well, right? You definitely saw some fraud going on, but we see fraud with every government program that goes out there, right, involving money. So I remember reading one article earlier, and they were talking about the amount of inmates that actually got loans approved during this time, and that got tax credits back during that program, right? They were able to get the $8,000 tax credit, even though some of the inmates that got approved for it were serving life sentences in prison. So you can see why sometimes when people hear about giving people money and talking about these things, from the government, it makes people stand back and take a second and be like, wait, I know there's going to be a whole bunch of fraud going on with that. How is this really going to help the problem? And these are valid questions that we need to ask, because it's not as simple as just saying, here's the money, go ahead and now buy what you need to buy. There's a lot of factors that go into it, and that's the things I'm trying to pay attention to. So let's get into her second point. Now, the next issue Vice President Harris is looking to address is the housing supply problem. Now, I've talked about this before in previous episodes, but I'm gonna break it down again. Now, the U.S. has a major housing supply issue. We're short over 4 million homes, and this has been a problem that's been growing ever since the last recession. Now, builders at a certain point said, you know what? We're not sure exactly how the economy is going to balance out, so let's give things some time, let's see what happens, and then we'll get back to the regularly scheduled program. And this obviously created an issue because buyers are still out there looking for homes, but the supply isn't keeping up with that demand at the time. And this has been a problem that's compounded year over year over year, to the point that we're at now where it's an issue for everybody. And it's increased the affordability problem, because once again, if there aren't as many homes for sale, the homes that are for sale are going to be at a higher price. And buyers are sitting here fighting each other, putting in multiple offers on different homes, and realizing that we just need more options. So that's something that both candidates are looking to address. Now, Vice President Harris has a plan of addressing this by creating a federal fund that basically gives builders an incentive, right? So it says, hey, listen, if you have this proposal, we'll create this fund that you can tap into, that we can approve and basically give you cash to say, go ahead and get that project done. Now, this is something that, once again, it sounds good, just like giving the $25,000 to home buyers, but what are the issues? A lot of these problems are going to come up when it comes to zoning, local regulations. What are you actually able to get done in the states and the cities on, once again, that local level? And that's the problem that people have continued to run into. You talk to developers, they're going to tell you they have problems getting permits approved, they're getting zoning modifications, all these things, so they can actually keep up and provide the type of product that people are looking for. And then you also look at the cost that goes into building these homes in the areas that they're able to build them. So it's a big problem, and it's going to be much more than just, giving people the money to get it done. But having a plan is a good place to start. And on President Trump's side, he also has a plan to address, cutting down zoning, opening up different federal lands and things like that, so builders have access to being able to go out there and do what it is that they need to do and want to do to create more opportunities and homes for first-time buyers like me and you. Now, there's also been discussion of Vice President Harris wanting to address issues with large investors. You've probably seen in the news headlines of how many houses people like BlackRock, Berkshire Hathaway, those major companies, how much they own. And sometimes people see those things and they're like, you know what? They're the problem. They're the reason why we can't go ahead and buy homes. Now, when you look at the statistics, it shows that most landlords are people like me and you, the everyday person who own a couple homes and not hundreds and hundreds or thousands. So sometimes we have to look a little bit deeper than the headlines and ask ourselves, okay, are they really the problem? And I'm not saying that they aren't driving some of these issues when it comes to, being able to present cash for a home that somebody else would have been able to get a mortgage on and things like that. But I think we have to ask ourselves if this is going to be the best solution to solve this problem. And I don't know. Who knows? We'll have to wait and see what solutions they actually come up with that actually solve some of these problems. So let's get into what Trump has planned. So like I was saying before, President Trump has talked about before wanting to really open up more federal lands and giving builders the opportunity to go into certain places, offering them tax incentives like the opportunity zones that were introduced before, so they can go into these areas and start developing big plots of this country that have just not gotten any attention. And once again, we might say, well, why haven't these places gotten any attention? There's just acres and acres and acres of land out there in America that should be developed. Well, on the backside of it, there's usually some pushback. And this is where we look at people who may not want construction to go on in their backyard. You have the term that I was looking at this, I thought it was pretty funny. The term, NIMBYs, NIMBY, not in my backyard. And the people who say, I want development, but I don't want it here close to my home because I think it's going to affect the value of my property. And once again, if you're a homeowner, if you're sitting there thinking, yeah, why would I want a big apartment complex or something like that, or a whole bunch of houses being built in my area because that might drive down the value of my home? Well, once again, there's also studies out there, and I can maybe tag some of those in the description for you guys, but there are studies that show that home values haven't been affected or haven't dropped when there was new construction and new development going on within their neighborhoods. It actually helps the value of some of these properties because people see this as a lively area where there's more going on and more opportunities coming around. So like I said, that's why I like to read the news, read into these studies, see what's going on, because you do hear a lot of conflicting information sometimes. And when you can really dive into it and say, okay, let me try to look at this from as much of a non-biased standpoint and see what's actually going on, you realize that sometimes people do try to propose these things, but they just run into a lot of pushback from forces that we don't see. And then we wonder why things aren't getting done. So moving on from the zoning changes that he wants to address. Another thing we've heard about from President Trump's administration is the idea of really cracking down on who is getting access to loans, right? I talked about before how back in 2009, there were inmates who were able to get approved for the tax credit that went on back then. During the pandemic, we saw businesses who had just started overnight that were able to get access to some of these huge business loans that the government was offering for real businesses. But once again, people see easy money from the government, and then there's going to be some fraud going on. So President Trump also proposed the idea when he was last in office of the idea of privatizing Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae. Now, real quick, these are two organizations that were created back in the 1900s with the hope of improving housing and home ownership in the US. And back in the last recession, around 2009, the government said, you know what, we need to take over this organization because they're the reason why we're in this crisis that we're in right now. They gave out a whole bunch of loans to people who shouldn't have been approved for them, and now look at where it led us. So let's make sure we can pretty much be like an overwatch of these organizations and not be in this position that we're in right now 10 years down the road. So they took over control. Fast forward to where we are now, President Trump and his allies are basically saying, we think we need to make these private institutions again that still have that kind of government stamp on them, but put them back into the private markets. Let's create some more competition, increase innovation within this industry, so people might have more access to loans that may not have been able to get approved before, and maybe they'll be lending in areas that may not have also had access to it as well. So this is something that I'm interested to see, because once again, when this change came about back in the early 2000s, I was like 13 years old and didn't really care about it, right? But now I do pay attention a lot, because I do work with lenders who have to approve loans, and it has to go through certain checklists for it to then be bought over from these organizations. And that's their main responsibility, right? Once the lender sends out the loan, you get approved for it. There's another person who then goes by, they buy these loans, package them up, and then they sell them on what's called like a secondary market as a security, right? So like a stock. And that's basically all the complicated stuff that goes on with that. But that's why it's so important for lenders nowadays to make sure they know who they're working with. So as you can see from everything I've broken down there, both of the candidates actually do have some sort of proposals to address housing affordability and the supply problems that we've been dealing with for years and years and years now. Now, do I think there's going to be a solution that comes up that's going to solve all of these problems overnight? Absolutely not, right? I think that would be crazy to believe, but I do see some way where we can take ideas from these different areas and say, okay, maybe we can take this and pierce it together so we can create a comprehensive plan that actually works for this housing problem. Because like I said, it's not going to be solved by just giving home buyers money. It's not going to be solved by just opening up land and telling builders to go ahead and build. It needs to be a combination of ideas, and I hope that that's the type of solution resolution that we can come to. But we'll see, because it's politics, and it's a very divisive time that we're in right now. I know some people are probably listening to this and being like, I don't care what that person's doing. I already know who I'm going with. And, I just know that that's the world that we live in. So we got to be honest about that as well. So I'm just saying, let's be optimistic. Let's see what can actually come from this and hope that there is a plan, because at the end of the day, no matter who we vote for, if they don't have a plan to actually address the problems that we're dealing with right here, none of it matters. We're just wasting our time. And that's why I wanted to sit down and break down some of these different points today, because I'm really curious about this stuff. I'm pretty sure you guys are really curious about this stuff, but you may not get the ability to talk about it or, really hear about some of these things going on from kind of like a non-biased standpoint, as much of a non-biased standpoint as possible, right? So that's what I wanted to do here. Break this down, see what you guys are thinking. Let me know, of course, as you're listening to this. Go ahead and type it in the comments. Shoot me a text if you got the number there, and just let me know what you're thinking. What do you think is going to happen? I love to talk about it. If you don't know me personally, I love to talk about politics. Me and my friends do it all the time. So let me know. Voice your opinion. I'm here to talk about it, and also telling you just to stay ahead of these decisions, right? No matter what's going on and what decisions are being made there, you also got to make sure that you're prepared no matter what to go ahead and buy that home. If new opportunities do come up, is your credit right? Do you have some money saved so you can qualify for some of these different programs? Because those are things that we can be doing right now. And if you have questions about, okay, well, what do those things look like, Dekimbe? What down payment assistance programs are out there right now? Are there opportunities in new construction that I can talk to some of these builders and get into a home? Let's have the conversation. Shoot me a text, shoot me an email. Those are the things I'm here to talk to you about and help you with outside of the podcast, right? So like I said, let's be proactive, have those conversations. If you needed to connect with a lender, see where you're at when it comes to a pre-approval, let me know. That's what I'm here to do, all right? And of course, if you guys are watching this on YouTube, subscribe. If you're listening to it on Apple Podcasts, subscribe, hit the like button. And of course, I'll be back again with another curious conversation for you guys. But until then, stay tuned, stay curious, and as always, enjoy your first sip.